The New Jersey Devils advance to the second round, taking on a familiar foe in the Carolina Hurricanes. We discuss what they accomplished coming out of round one and what it will look like to advance beyond the Canes in round number two. Coming up next. Yes, sir. It's the Devil's Puck Luck podcast, where, of course, I am one of the hosts here, and that would be one Adam Armbrecht, breaking down, obviously, this second round matchup with the Carolina Hurricanes, the team that we tried to chase down and narrowly caught during the regular season. Not seen here is going to be one Danny McDonough, but we'll be back in with our post-game coverage. Danny, who was there for the Game 7 victory on home ice at the Rock, what was, you know what? A great surprise in the way that the Devils were able to dominate and control that pivotal game number 7. And, it's funny. We're going to just highlight some of the high-level things here when we talk about the New Jersey Devils. But coming into this second-round series with the Canes, obviously starting tonight on the road. But I will get one thing off my chest, because if you followed this show, we've talked about kind of the even temper you want to have, right? Not getting too high, not getting too low. We specifically talk about referees and saying, listen, sometimes you feel like the breaks aren't going your way, but ultimately you want to not rest on the idea of, well, because of that call, because of that penalty, right? Play through it, play beyond it. And the Devils had to do that in several instances throughout that first round series. But the thing that got to me the most, bar none, the thing that got to me the most was heading into that game 7, listening to local radio coverage, which, and I get it, a lot of this is New York-based sports, and we're just New Jersey off to the side there, even though we're the home to 2 NFL football teams. We don't have to get into it. The level of expectation, not thinking that the Rangers should win, not basing it on experience, right, or the veterans that they had on that roster, and obviously having Shesterkin between the pipes and in his resume in the playoffs, right? All of those things you could point to. But the level of, well, how deep, this question was posed ahead of game number 7. How deep do you think the Rangers can go in these playoffs? Eliciting a foregone conclusion that they were going to get out of that game 7. So that did. It got my blood boiling. It got me to a place where I was pretty darn frustrated. Thankfully, the Devils had one heck of a performance, and they'll be advancing on to take on the Canes. And when we turn our attention over to it, one of the first things we're just going to address here, and a credit to Amanda Stein, obviously. She's been covering and then reiterating it here just about 47 minutes ago. So 1 hour ago, she had reported that Timo Meier is a game-time decision for the Devils against the Canes, and then followed it up just about 50 minutes ago, noting, since everyone's asking, Timo Meier will see how he feels after today's morning skate and this afternoon, which is why he's a game-time decision for game number 1. Now, it's hard to have any other expectations than he will be available, and they'll address it as needed. But it does go back to this previous series, and I think it's coming out of game 4 possibly, where Danny and I talked about it in one of the post games, and then going into game, I think, number 5 there, where it was Timo does look like he's laboring, right? And they've needed his physicality, they needed his presence there in a lot of key moments, and there was just a world where it was going to take its toll, and I think it in fact did. So we'll see how it ends up playing itself out throughout the remainder of this afternoon, but obviously adjustments will need to get made if Timo will not be available. It also does then, though, lead us into the conversation just about this team overall, and it's not to, unfortunately, say, hey, if Timo can't go, what are they gaining or losing? A little bit different, obviously, in terms of matchup and what you're going to want to be paying attention for in this series with the Canes, a team that they've played throughout the season, as we know. Arguably had that beautiful 3-0 shutout that felt like the foothold back into this season when things seem to be on really a shaky ground for the Devils. When we go into the plus minus coming out of that first round series, yes, Timo Meier holds the worst at -3. And there's so much more than that. And Danny always talks about this. The plus minus is not indicative of how you're performing on the ice on a game-to-game basis. But when it comes to Timo, we said, right, and clearly maybe some level of injury concern here coming out of those last few games. But there were instances where doesn't quite get his stick on the puck, excuse me, in some of the passes going into the offensive zone. Seemed a little bit a step behind. And then, frankly, even though you want him to be playing physically and be that present for you, there were moments he had his ugliest performance as a New Jersey Devil in the first round, right? Several bad turnovers, sloppy play, and you never want to take away the element of what an injury can be doing to a player, but you also can't hang your hat on it, right? Same thing talking about referees and how they can influence a series based on different calls. If you're out there on the ice, I need to be able to rely on you for consistency. So keeping an eye on what happens with him. The other big thing that we didn't get to really dive into deep here, and we've got just a tons of fun between Danny going to the games, me packing up a little bit of my life here and changing living conditions. So it's been a bit chaotic, but Akira Schmid, man, we talked about this coming out in game number 6, where the Devils obviously lost at MSG, and then we're coming back home and saying, hey, is there any world where you would flip the script and go back to VTech potentially? And to a man across the board, it was, no, you have to stick with Schmid. He's earned this moment here for himself. And you go look at these numbers, right? It's easy to first just say, well, how did he perform, obviously, in the series overall? Because he did more than just show up in these 4 games. He came on in relief as well. So when you first look at it, you go, well, 4-1 record, a 1.38 goals against, save percentage of 951. But then you dial it up inside of these 4 victories across that series, where he obviously had the 2 shutouts, a save percentage over 980, and a goals against under 1 collectively across that line. So the games where they've won and the games where he's been successful, where the team has been successful, obviously Akira Schmid has been so critical to that success. And what I really loved about it, one of my biggest concerns coming out in game number 6 is the ways in which the Rangers were scoring goals, going glove side and trying to elevate that puck. Now, in game number 7, you can make the argument that that's what they were trying to continue to go to and weren't quite getting those pucks as high as they may have wanted to. But there's no two ways about it. Not only did Akira Schmid show up in a massive way with the shutout, but in those moments, I mean, listen, it felt like he was saying, I know that this is the thing you want to do, and I'm going to show it to you. You want to go glove side, because I'm positioning myself to protect that near post. I'm going to give you the far post shot, and I'm going to time and time again, most critically, not only make the save, but also protect and prevent the rebounds from being available. So these are just obviously some of those high level things that we loved coming out of that series. And why? I said this over on Twitter. Like, there's a world where we're watching the beginning of the next great run for New Jersey Devils goaltenders, right? And it'll be very interesting to see how these early games play out against the Carolina Hurricanes. But when you have this sample size from Schmid, it showcases that he is very capable of shutting down the opposition consistently. Then we turn our attention, though, over to what I think needs to change here. As remember, we're going to be taking on the Canes. The neutral zone becomes that much more critical. We know the forechecking is so dangerous for the Canes as well. And obviously, we say this all the time with our young roster. But overall, protecting the puck is going to be paramount for the Devils. Playing clean hockey is as important to anything the Devils do offensively, defensively, positioning, goaltending, because we know that when they see the opportunities to break out, when they look to make those 2-line passes, and we saw this with Siegenthaler, right? His combination there in game number, let's say 5. I think I have that right. And making himself available. Now, he actually ultimately, as was pointed out over on YouTube, gets it to Hamilton. Hamilton makes the outlet pass. But the sequence in totality stands, right? When those moments present themselves, getting it up to Nico Hischier on the right wing and then making himself available in the middle of the ice, the Devils want to go with that. The speed matters. We go back to those first couple of games against the Rangers. It's hard when you look at those 5-1 score lines and think everything must have gone wrong. But remember, early in those games, they were getting the Rangers to chase. They were getting the Rangers to take penalties. So they want to be able to use their speed. They want to be able to break out. But because the Hurricanes are very good and very adept at forcing turnovers and very adept at taking it over in the neutral zone, this is and you could say this about a lot of series. You could say this about a lot of matchups. But that critical nature of protecting the puck and playing smart with the puck on your stick, it goes such a long way for the Devils to have consistent success over the course of a series. You know, Hockey is funny that way. Puck luck matters, as we know. But when we go back and look at that 7-game series against the Rangers, overall, you'd say take away the first 2 games, look at the last 5, and you'd say by and large, the Devils played pretty consistent, strong hockey across the board. Now, the question about individual play is something that on a game-to-game basis you can point out and say, "Ugh, is that what we're looking there from certain players?" But to have that consistency, it's keep the puck on your stick, control that neutral zone, be quick, break out, use your speed. But the recovery, those opportunities to pinch and to hold the offensive zone, we saw instances inside of the Rangers series where those looks in 4 out of 7 games, I think the pinches were very effective, holding that puck in and keeping the pressure on the Rangers. Arguably, in game number 7, the Devils did the best job of one thing that I talked about throughout this series with Danny, wanting the Devils to gain that offensive zone and be willing 5-on-5 to hold that puck and try to set up a little bit of that rhythm in the offensive zone. We love the speed, we love the breakout, but we also want to be able to say, let's make sure that our line changes are able to happen effectively. Let's make sure that if we can keep a line out there on the ice for the opposition another 30 seconds longer, another 45 seconds longer, that's the way that we wear down some legs and put some tired bodies on the ice. Something that I think by the end of game 7, we saw really paying dividends against the Rangers. The one other thing that I'll just go high level here, and we're just kind of firing off some shots here. Shout out to Whistler. Shout out to Jay over there in the live chat. Thanks for joining in on a little bit of something we haven't done too often, but we're going to try to do more of here. And when time permits, just some live broadcast ahead of game nights. One high level question that I end up having coming into this Canes series, and it's regardless of whether or not success or failure. It's reflecting back on the Rangers series and trying to determine what was that Rangers team? Right? Because we know how congested the division was. What did we see? Was that a true test? Because again, in the first 2 games, when the Devils felt like they did everything wrong to give those games to the Rangers, it looked a little bit like a mess. But the next 5, the Devils were the better team. The Devils were the better team. Took another loss, obviously. That's defensive positions, staying in passing lanes, staying in front of the net, forcing those guys out of the crease, obviously. And the big difference in that game 6 loss for me was not closing down the shooters at the point, something they did very effectively the game prior, and they once again picked back up in game number 7. So I have this little bit of a sense of like, and this is the way hockey players are, it's the way we should be as fans. Shut that series down and now completely recalibrate yourself for this next one. Because the areas that you maybe struggled in the previous series aren't necessarily going to matter here. And the spots that you had success need to be maintained at a high level. So I don't know. There's something there for me. There's a enormous amount of anxiety coming into this first game against the Canes and reigniting this series. The other things that we'll touch on here is don't forget, obviously, Anderson came in to that final game for the Canes. So that's going to be interesting to watch just over the course of this entire series. Helps close out that first round for the Canes as well. On the Devils side, we said mentioning about where Timo Meyer stands on this. Obviously, you have to be pleasantly surprised with Haula in this one, that first series, getting 4 goals, 2 assists. The biggest thing for me here is striking balance across these lines, being a contributor in multiple facets of the game. So when we talk about the hierarchy, listen, there wasn't a ton of goal scoring here. And in some ways, there's one name that stands out very clearly in the first round that you want to see in this goal scoring column. But Haula with 4, 3 for Hughes, Palat, thanks Palat. Yes, and more than once throughout that first round series with his effective play. 2 goals, 3 assists, 2 assists apiece for those top 2 players as well for the Devils. As you work your way down the list, though, with 2 goals for Mercer, a goal for Bratt, but 3 assists, right? Continuing to balance your sheet and impact the game in positive ways. It's why when we tiptoed down the line in terms of where Nico Hischier was not in the goal scoring column, but where was he? He was in the assist column, setting up players, setting up teammates, and you need to be ready to kind of set the table for those around you and make sure that you continue to maintain that offensive rhythm. When we talk about point totals players here, it does go Haula, Hischier, Palat, Hughes, Barat, Mercer, and then Hamilton. And it's good to see guys like Marino, like Severson pitching in with the assist as well. A big part of my question here is, Who do you go down the list for the Devils who did not have success or have an impact the way we might have expected it in series number one that can step up here in a big way? Man, McLeod's goal in game 7, thing of beauty, right? Showing that level of control with the puck on his stick, rating around the crease, deking out Shesterkin and putting that one away. That was certainly massive. Lazar, this was an interesting switch there in game number 7. As we know, he plays in 4 total games, but Miles Wood reemerges there. There's some interesting things that are going to unfold here for the Devils inside of this second round series. Lazar, I thought, had a very successful run once he got onto the ice. I thought the ball stepped up in a great way. A guy that I'm mildly concerned about, even though I have confidence in him, is Graves, right? Because with the puck on his stick in games number 5, games number 6, we know he uses his body. He shields off the opposition. He allows himself the opportunity to possess the puck out of the defensive zone and then move it forward accordingly. But there were a lot of shaky moments in that game number 7 for him. So I have a real set of eyes on Graves and his ability to effectively control the puck, get it out of the defensive zone, and then set up the offense to have some success. Because even though we look at the Rangers as being a physical test for the Devils, every series is a physical test for the Devils. And I just think that the one thing we're going to have to watch out for from the Hurricanes is a pressing offensive presence that tries to force some defensive zone turnovers, and then whether or not the Devils have that scramble ability to find their assignments, tighten up in front of Schmid, and make it difficult for the Canes to have success. It's, these are all high level things. I just wanted to come in and, quite frankly, I'm disappointed to get to come and really celebrate getting out of that first round, right? But there are just automatically you turn over and you start to think, what are expectations here? What are expectations for Miles Wood coming into this series, right? Is there any expectation for Luke Hughes? I called for him in the first series. You win that playoff series, so there's no reason to question it. But again, going forward, did you see enough? Did you like what you got on the power play units, first and second? Some adjustments made there from Lindy Ruff as well, as far as who went out for first shift sometimes. Do you want to create another wrinkle that the Canes have to adjust to? The last thing that I'll kind of point out here as well, we know one of the other things accomplished in that first round was Lindy Ruff winning a playoff series. Yes. 0 for 4. Now, off the schneid, gets his first one there, right? He did a nice job adjusting, readjusting, and recalibrating the lineups as they worked their way through the series, right? It was a chess match. And there were shaky moments throughout the season when it comes to how much meddling he did with the lines. But if we want to think of it from a silver lining standpoint, some of these combinations have familiarity with one another. Some of these lineups can look different and not feeling like you're throwing something completely new out there for the very first time. So, listen, man, we know that the Devils are going to be slight underdogs here. Home ice does play a factor. The Devils were incredibly effective on the road this season. And this just feels like right here, lump, just right in my chest, right in the throat. That's what the series is going to kick off and be. I don't lack for confidence in what the Devils can accomplish. I will say, if we just go back and look at the first round, I would prefer to see the Devils be a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more explosive when it comes to the offensive end, right? Some real moments of brilliance for Jack Hughes, 3 goals in that series, some real opportunities in odd man rushes when they presented themselves, some shorthanded goals when they presented themselves. But when you go back and look at those 2 shutouts, 4-0, those are brilliant, right? But only putting 2 goals on the board there in game number 6, empty netter in the 3-1 victory, obviously winning in overtime 2-1, and then those first 2 games of the series, just 1 single goal. I just want to see the Devils be able to open things up, right? Games where they lost in round 1 were when they were giving up big score lines here. So can they run if they had to? Can they win some 4-3 games inside of this series is something that I'm really going to be excited for. 7 p.m. tonight. By the way, though, 8 o'clock on Friday night. So a later start on TNT for the prime time, and then 3:30 on Sunday, May 7th for game number 3. They've laid out the first 4 games of the series, obviously waiting to see how they unfold. But then 7 o'clock on Tuesday, May 9th. And obviously those 2 games being home, Sunday and Tuesday, Danny at a minimum is going to be there. I may be involved in a couple of those as well. Devils need to skate fast. They need to play clean. They need to be smart in the neutral zone. And I'm directly looking at Jack Hughes, with as brilliant as he can be, Just don't be careless with that puck on your stick. Stick to your defensive assignments. Be ready to work those boards. Be ready for the forechecking of Carolina. And frankly, look right in between the posts here. Akira Schmid can very much be setting the tempo. It'll be fascinating to watch him between the pipes and see if this just carries right over. What a tremendous job by him coming out of that game 6 loss and just completely resetting himself and answering a 31 for 31 shutout performance in a game 7. There's no bigger moment, right? It'll get bigger in the next game 7 of the playoffs, but there's no bigger moment that he has been able to be, a test put in front of him that he's been able to answer. So it's been phenomenal. That being the case, follow us on social media. If it's not NJ Devils PL on Twitter, it could also be at Adam Arbrecht. It can also be at Danny the Face over on YouTube at Devils Puck Luck Podcast, over on Instagram at Devils Puck Luck Podcast as well. Man, round number 2. Where can this team go? What do you think is possible for this team? The Boston Bruins losing, by the way. And I didn't touch the money on this one because that occurred before the Devils went into their game 7. The Boston Bruins losing and then the Devils getting out of that first round, it certainly creates a much different landscape in the Eastern Conference right now. And any team that is still in it has to be looking and saying, why not us, right? The number one, the most dangerous adversary from the regular season coming into the postseason, just everything that they were on paper. The Boston Bruins are no longer there. So the Devils, a young team, a team that's out ahead of schedule, certainly we think by a year or maybe more, is now staring down these playoffs and thinking, we have teams that we have familiarity with, teams we've gone toe-to-toe with, teams we've beaten, and now we get to put ourselves to the next big test, as was said by Nico Hischier and everyone else in their pre-game interviews earlier today. You turn the page, you take on the next assignment, you don't even worry about what you accomplished in the last series, and that's a short memory for the guys that had success and also for the guys that feel like they have more to prove. Follow us all over the social media. Thank you for checking in with us on Devils Puck Luck. We'll be back in. Hopefully, as the man will improve on the ice, so too shall it be. All things gravy and oh baby, Dougie, come back.